Hi, I don't know if you can hear me. We're just waiting to start our speech writing masterclass. So yeah, just pop your pop a little message in the chat box if you can hear me, if the sound's working. Quite often when I start these lives, there's like a little bit of a technical delay at the beginning. Oh, good. Apparently, apparently the sound works fine, which is good. Yeah, so we'll just wait a few minutes for people to join and then we'll get started on the masterclass. I'm just going to type a couple of things in the chat box that we'll be covering today. So the first thing we'll go through is what is a speech? Oh, great. Thank you. Yeah, so we'll go through what is a speech. We're going to go through rhetorical devices and structuring. And then we'll also go through an example speech. The one I've chosen from the list of suggested ones that I put in that speech writing document is Emmeline Pankhurst's freedom or death speech, really famous speech that she gave about women's suffrage, so votes for women. And then if we have time at the end, we'll see. The last thing I want to try and squeeze in is a little bit of planning and writing practice. So that's kind of how the lesson's going to go, hopefully. And yeah, and from there we'll hopefully cover all of this, I think. So yeah, so we'll just wait a minute or two for people to join. If there's anything you want me to cover, so if you have questions or comments, please do use the chat box. And yeah, if there's anything you've got that's like a question where you want me to sort of answer it, help you, support you, feel free to just pop it in there as a question. Or if you're watching this after the live recording, you can always just comment below if you've got questions and we'll answer there as well. Good. Yeah, so I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully this works. Yeah, hopefully you can see this. Good. I think that's come up now. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so I run a platform called Scrbbly, which is an online educational platform. This is our YouTube branch of Scrbbly, and we make resources, revision documents, teaching materials, online video courses, all sorts of things for GCSE English and A-level English too. And yeah, and so this is one of our documents. It's available for free. If you just follow the link in the comments of this live video, you can download it there. And yeah, it's just an example of our teaching material. So I'm going to be using this to teach from today. Yeah, so we'll go through some basics, first of all, about speeches and what they are, how they work. So yeah, speech is a formal talk given to an audience. It's expressing ideas and information in spoken words, and they can have different purposes, but most speeches are persuasive to start with. They might be motivational, they might be entertaining or informative, but when you're writing a speech, especially for an exam, the persuasive purpose is the most important purpose. So yeah, speeches are kind of mostly persuasive, which means you need to use something called rhetorical devices, because rhetorical devices are specific techniques that writers use for persuasive writing. There's different places that people give speeches as well, so events, ceremonies, public gatherings, school, academic settings, professional settings. So there's different ways that public speaking is used in society, and the different context of where the speech happens also should affect how you write that speech. So if you're doing an exam question where you have to do a speech kind of piece that you're writing, you want to make sure that you are aware of who is your audience and what is the context of that speech. So it's not just the same every single time you write a speech. It should feel a little bit modified and adapted to the context. Yeah, so a good speech is actually structured similar to an essay. It has an introduction, a main body, and a conclusion. The intro is outlining the main idea of the speech. The body is exploring different topics in different paragraphs, and the conclusion just kind of summarizes your main aims with that speech. So the main purpose, the main reason you're writing. So yeah, we want to kind of make it structured a little bit like an essay, but language-wise, it doesn't look like an essay at all. The language of a speech is very different from the language of an essay. I'm just going to make a little note in the chat box about this, just because it's super important to remember. So speech language is formal, but also familiar and approachable. So it strikes a line between the type of academic language you would use in essays, and then also sorry, Mike, I've got two cats and they're just being a nuisance, so I'm going to put one. They both jumped up on the desk at the same time and they were about to have a fight, so I've just thrown one on the floor. We'll carry on. Yeah, so formal but familiar and approachable. So it's a mixture of really engaging and easy to listen to and entertaining, and also quite serious and really trustworthy. So when you write in a formal way, people trust you. When you write informally, people like you. And if you're delivering a speech, you need a balance of those two things. Yeah, so one of the best things you can do for any kind of transactional writing or practical non-fiction writing paper for GCSE English is learn rhetoric. I said this earlier, but a few more people have joined since then, so I thought I'd say it again. So yeah, rhetorical elements are really important. Learn a huge list of rhetorical devices and get used to confidently using them in your speech. If you use things like credibility, which means you're believable, people trust you and believe you. Use emotions, which means people feel like they care about what you're talking about. And logic, which means people feel like you're appealing to their intelligence. You sort of trust that they have their own intelligence and they can work out what you're saying for themselves. That is the best balance for a speech. So credibility, emotions, and logic. You also want to think about your tone, your style. All of this is adapted to your audience. If you were delivering the speech, you'd use body language, but we're going to mostly be focusing on how you write a speech for an exam here, so I won't talk too much about that one. Yeah, so this is just a few more tips about how to write a speech. The first thing, definitely we want to know the purpose. What is the reason for writing? The purpose for writing is the same as the focus on your question. So the focus of a question is the reason or the thing that you're writing about. So you want to just be really careful about identifying the focus of your question first before you plan, before you think about anything. If you've missed what the focus of your question is, the whole speech will be off. So just be really careful that you know the purpose first. After that, the audience is important. The formality is going to change depending on if it's a serious adult audience, if it's an audience of specialists, if it's children, if it's in an informal context. So you want to think about the interests of your audience, the personalities of your audience, what they're expecting, how they're going to respond to the language you've used, especially when you're aiming for those higher levels, like from a level 6 up to a level 9. You need to be really targeted towards the audience. If you're aiming for those mid-levels, like a 4 or a 5, it's not so important. Just try and get your structure right and your language good. But yeah, when you're trying to perfect and refine and improve and aim for increasing amounts of marks on the exam, then you definitely want to know your audience. Yeah, so then you plan your speech and you structure it correctly before you write it. If you're doing an exam that's about between 45 and 55 minutes for writing, which most are, like the AQA English GCSE, the edXL, both of those are around that amount of time that you get to write a speech. For that, I would recommend about 5 to 7 minutes planning, because you don't want to plan too long. If you plan for ages, you won't have time to finish your writing. So you don't get marked on the plan. The plan is just for you to see where you're going. If you don't plan at all, that's also bad, because you'll just be kind of randomly coming up with ideas, and then your structure won't feel confident, and that will drop you quite a lot of marks. So really important to plan, but really also important to not spend too much time on planning. It's a bit of a difficult balance. Yeah, I'll just make a note of that in the chat box too. So your plan, you want to aim for sort of 5 to 7 minutes. You just plan the main topics or ideas of your speech. Yeah, so you want logical sequencing, meaning the ideas that you have, they're not just sort of 4 or 5 random points. They need to flow properly. They need to build one on top of the other. So every paragraph that you write in your speech is going to flow and develop from the last one. You want to use expanded information as well. So a lot of my personal students that I tutor, they don't always expand their ideas. They come up with tons of really good ideas for this nonfiction writing question, and then they kind of put loads of little mini paragraphs in there, or they just kind of repeat their ideas a lot without developing. So again, to get those higher grades, you need to do this. This is super, super important. So you give your point, but then you present some examples, you present some data, you present some evidence, and then you analyze that, similar to how you would do a PE paragraph in an essay, but in a less formal way. So yeah, we'll look more into how to do that in a minute when we look at the example from Emmeline Pankhurst. When you do your conclusion, you're just summarizing your main ideas, your main opinions, your main points about the question. You don't want to add any new things. You don't want to analyze at that point. You just reinforce the central message or purpose of your speech, and ideally leave a lasting impression. That could be through humor. It could be through like some sort of powerful emotional statement. It could be through something inspirational or kind of clever and intelligent. So the final sentence of your speech, ideally make that count, make that really impactful. That usually comes across quite well to an examiner. Yeah, it's always a balance in exams about how you use your language. So you want complex language in terms of formal academic language, but you also don't want jargon or overly, ooh, what have I done here? Where did it go? Oh, my page just disappeared. Yeah, I'll just talk for a second, because somehow that page just went blank. I don't know how that happened. Yeah, you don't want too formal your language. You want it to be in between formal and informal. You want it to use good terminology that is related to that question and that topic, but you don't want to pack it so full of that it feels confusing to flow. Like it doesn't flow, you can't follow it properly. So it's really important. The most important thing is that people can follow your logical thinking, your structuring, your organization, and then after that you use complex vocab. If you try and throw loads of fancy words in there, it's going to just throw off the meaning. It's not going to flow properly. So yeah, just be really careful about that. I still don't know what I did here. It's never done that before. Yeah, so we're going to have a look at a famous speech. There's a huge list of them on this document, which again, you can just download it for free from the comments here. I recommend going through all of them. They're all amazing, powerful speeches that change the world in different ways. They're iconic. They contain some of the most effective sentences ever written or delivered to an audience. There's a mixture of very old and very new ones. We're going to have a look at this one, the Emmeline Pankhurst Freedom or Death speech. So yeah, she was a suffragette, which means she was a woman who campaigned for women's votes and women's rights back when women were not allowed the vote in society. And she's an American woman, so she specifically was trying to influence women getting the vote in America. She succeeded. She was a very influential, if not the most influential woman of this time. And this speech is one of the most important things she ever did to change people's opinion on the idea that women should be able to vote. So it has a really strong, genuine, real-life political impact. So yeah, I'm gonna share that speech with you guys now. Let me just find it somewhere on my computer. It's one of those things where I downloaded and I just don't know where it's gone. It will be here somewhere. Ah, here we go. Yes, I should be able to share that with you. Yeah. So we're just going to have a look. We're going to do a bit of a deep dive into the first 3 or 4 paragraphs here. So you can do this along with me if you want. So we're going to take a minute to just read through. And as we read through, we're going to try and find anything that is powerful, anything that is making an interesting or strong impact on the audience. So it might be a word, it might be a phrase or a sentence, it might be a technique that you notice, it could even be something to do with the structuring, punctuation or something like that. So I'll put that as a task in the chat. So we're going to read the first 3 paragraphs of the speech and find powerful words and phrases that motivate or inspire the audience. Yeah, so I'll give you a few minutes to read through and do that. I'll do it at the same time, and then we can compare notes. If you feel confident, feel free to pop your notes in the chat box. But equally, if you're not confident, you don't have to do that. You can just make them on your own computer. You can also put any unknown vocabulary into the chat box. So when you read speeches, especially older speeches, they quite often have words that we don't know in there because they use kind of more complex language. So if you want me to translate or explain any words as you're working, you can just put any unknown vocabulary in the chat box as well. So if you're like, I don't know what this word means, just pop it in there and I'll help you with it. Yeah, so we'll spend about 5 minutes or so reading and thinking about this. One thing that's coming across to me as I read is her sort of personality is very strong as well, and you'll notice that it's quite important. Like the character of the speaker should come across through the writing. So as you're kind of finding things that are quite powerful, you might think about how do those connect to her personality and the impression she's giving of herself here. Yeah, I'll give you another minute or so just to find a couple more ideas and then we'll go through it together. Yeah, good. So I'll stop you there. It's okay if you've not found everything. You just, the main purpose was to just sort of try and train your brain to see powerful words, see powerful phrases, have a look at kind of anything that makes an impact emotionally or intellectually on you when you read it. Another thing that's quite interesting, actually, she's talking to Mrs. Hepburn, ladies and gentlemen, and Mrs. Hepburn is a fellow suffragette who is the mother of the actress Katharine Hepburn. So I really like Katharine Hepburn. She's like an old Hollywood sort of classic actress. And before I studied the speech, I didn't actually realize that her mother was a campaigner for women's rights, but I just thought that was kind of cool. Yeah, so pop anything that you've got in the chat box that you think is a useful, powerful word, phrase, sentence, and so on, if you feel like it. And I'm just going to go through some of my favorite things about these paragraphs here. Good. So the first thing that she does is she says why most people come to this place to give speeches and have meetings. And she says that they come as advocates of some reform. Someone who advocates for something is somebody who supports it and they say, oh, I think this should happen. I think it would be good if we did this. She says she's not an advocate. So it's crazy because everyone that is here is usually an advocate. She uses negation, negative phrasing to surprise the audience from the beginning. Because everyone that goes there is trying to advocate for something. They want something to happen. They want to support a certain political cause. And she says, I'm not an advocate. I'm not here to suggest that we should change society. I'm not here to advocate women's suffrage. American suffragists can do that very well for themselves. So it's interesting that she starts by saying, I'm not here to just talk on behalf of these women. These women are intelligent enough to talk on behalf of themselves. I don't need to speak up for them. It's surprising and interesting, unusual. It's kind of motivational in a way. And yeah, she uses the technique of negation. She also uses this, which is a technique called amplification. So this issue of women not having the right to vote has passed beyond the realm of advocacy and it's entered into the sphere of practical politics, which means it's gone beyond just people just nicely saying, wouldn't it be good if women could vote? And it actually is a practical need now. It's something that we need to take very seriously. It's not just sort of something we can hold a meeting about and dream about and hope it happens. We need to take some physical, practical action. My favorite thing that she says is this metaphor. I'm here as a soldier who's temporarily left the field of battle in order to explain. It seems strange it should have to be explained what civil war is like when civil war is waged by women. It's very interesting. She sees herself as a soldier. She's fighting for something, but she's fighting not for a physical cause, but for a political cause. So yeah, this is a very powerful metaphor. It's interesting that she uses a hypermasculine metaphor to describe herself. She sees herself as a soldier who is usually out on the field of battle, which for her would mean she's in the middle of doing marches, protests, campaigns. And yeah, she's taken time out of doing all that active stuff to just stand in front of people and talk for a minute about what she's doing, why she's doing it. So even though she's a political person who's campaigning for votes for women, she sees it as a battle, she sees it as a war, and she is just a soldier in that war. And you can see that she really respects her fellow suffragists as well. She views all of them as soldiers too. I am here as a person who, according to the laws of my country, it has been decided, is of no value to the community at all. She's got what we call an accusatory tone. She's accusing the society of not valuing her. And she finds it so strange that as a woman, she has absolutely no rights to vote in this country. So she has these little asides as well. You might have noticed with the punctuation. This is kind of interesting. She has twice now. It seems strange it should have to be explained. And she also says, where did it go? That, I think, is the strangest part of my coming. She has this kind of baffled personality. She's baffled and confused about why her society doesn't value her. And she's obviously using very political, very formal, and very advanced language to show her intelligence and her education and her passion. And so she's thinking, it makes no sense that someone like me who has got this much intelligence and passion is not valued enough to even have any kind of political difference in this country, because women can't vote. Yeah, and then she sort of makes a joke here. So she uses humor, which is really interesting. You see, there is some special interest in hearing so unusual a person address you. She's aware that as a woman speaking out in a political context, that is very unusual for her time. And, you know, I dare say in the minds of many of you, you will perhaps forgive me this personal touch, that I do not look either very like a soldier or very like a convict, like a criminal, and yet I'm both. So she's saying that what she's doing is kind of against the laws of her country, but all she's doing is speaking out and saying, well, you know, we should have the vote. So yeah, her use of humor there is a really nice touch. So you might have found some other techniques here, and you might have noticed other things as well. There's a lot of first person, for example. I am here to do this. I am here to do that. I am both of these things, a soldier and a criminal. And yeah, you might have gone further into this paragraph, or even if you've got access to the whole document later down, there's, you know, she goes into more detail with it. But hopefully you're getting a sense of how and why speech writing can be powerful. So she's aware of her audience. She's aware of her audience's prejudices. She's aware of their expectations of her, and she plays around with those, and she kind of uses a mixture of quite powerfully emotive language and also humor to kind of get the audience's attention and to grab their interest. So yeah, hopefully you guys found that interesting and useful. I really liked her speech. I think it's very inspiring. So we're going to have a look at how do we do this ourselves now, because one thing you have to do in GCSE English exams is analyze these speeches, but the other side of it is you have to write them as well. So we're just going to quickly have a look at how do you write them? What do we do there? I have a practice question that we can have a look at here. So this comes from the AQA GCSE English exams. I think it was a couple of years ago this one came up on the paper, but you can use it for any type of GCSE English language exam because they all require you to do non-fiction transactional writing. So yeah, the marks might be a little bit different, so ignore the marks if your exam board isn't AQA. But apart from the marks being different, you should be able to to use this type of thing. Oh, apparently the screen's not working now. Okay, I'm gonna just pop the question in the chat box just because, yeah, I don't, for some reason it's decided not to share. So people, what is the question? People protest about the cruelty of keeping animals in captivity. But they seem happy enough to eat meat. Keep pets and visit zoos. And all animals should be free. Very strong opinion. Yeah, so we're going to have a look at this question. I'm just popping it in the chat box because for some reason the screen refused to share. We're going to write a speech where we explain our point of view on the statement. And I'm going to take you through it step by step. Obviously, I have pets, so I'm not going to be entirely agreeing with the speech myself, because, yeah, I don't think keeping pets is mean. I don't think so. Yeah, so write a speech where you explain your point of view on this topic. And it's important that you can have any opinion you want. You can totally agree and think we should all be vegan, we should never have pets, we should never go to zoos, and we should just let animals go be free. But you can totally disagree as well and think that they're all fine. Even keeping animals in captivity is fine. Or you can be somewhere in the middle and take a middle position. So yeah, completely up to you where you stand on this. So step one would be to figure out your opinion. You might want to jot down a few ideas of what your opinion is on this question and just think about it for a minute. You can come up with ideas that are for and against. This lesson is now brought to you by me and my cat, who really wants to sit on my knee, but I'm not letting her because I'm trying to teach. So she's just sitting on the edge of my chair instead. Yeah, so I'll give you a minute to think about your opinion and to think of a few points that agree and disagree with this question about zoos. As you do that, I'm going to try and share my screen again because I was going to work on a Google document. So yeah, hopefully you can see me typing. Here. Can you see this? Is it working? Yeah, that seems to be working for me. So hopefully you guys can see it as well. Yeah, so I'm going to just put my opinion first, and then I'll do those points for and against, and you can see how I do it, so you can kind of make your answer look a bit like my answer. Okay, so yeah, that's me just kind of off the top of my head coming up with some points there. Take a minute to look through if you were writing your own points. So I've expanded this topic. I've turned it into the idea that I noticed actually with this one, it's quite difficult because it's got a lot of smaller points. So it's not just about all animals should be free, full stop. If you just think about the idea that all animals should be free by itself, you probably won't have enough detailed points that you can make into different paragraphs. So you should break that topic down and try and think about like different aspects or elements of the question if you can. So we have this idea of the cruelty of keeping animals in captivity, eating meat, keeping pets, and visiting zoos. You could disagree with some of these and agree with other ones. I think most people I know would. I happen to just disagree with all of them personally. But my sister, for example, I've had huge debates with her in the past because she's very strongly vegetarian and she was vegan for a little while. And she absolutely does not eat meat, and she refuses to visit zoos. She hates zoos, and she thinks pets are fine because my mum has a cat and she likes her. So if my sister was writing this, she would have a different opinion to me. She would have some things she agrees, some things she disagrees with. So it's very important with non-fiction transactional writing that you're quite true to yourself and your opinion and what you think. And yeah, this is my personal opinion on these on the matter. So we're going to turn this from a set of series of random points into a plan. So you can plan along with me here. Where did my thing go? Yeah, so the plan needs to organize these random thoughts into some sort of logical shape, if you remember what I said at the beginning. So we want to go through the points in a good order. The first thing we do is we'd introduce the topic. So the first paragraph is going to be the intro. As with a speech, the best thing to do with your intro is you can outline the debate first. So you can kind of think about both sides. Why people think animals should be free, why other people think it might be okay to keep them in captivity, or whether there's a middle ground. Some types of captivity are wrong. And then what you do is you present your opinion. So this is like what you think and why. The main thing with this part of the intro, the bit where you present your opinion, that you have to do is make sure you have a very clear position and stance on the topic. It doesn't have to fully agree or fully disagree, but it's easier to do that if you're starting out. So if you're not confident on this kind of speech writing, I really recommend that you just totally agree or totally disagree, because that makes your structuring easier. And then when you get a bit more confident, you can start to take that more middle ground. But the middle ground will make the structure harder. So yeah, for the sake of doing well on this question, just agree and disagree until you're very confident. And then when you feel confident, you can start to go more into those middle positions. Yeah, and ideally be true to yourself. So hopefully you do have a strong opinion on whatever question they give you, and your opinion is, yeah, it's something that you care about, that you have a strong idea about. Because if you're true to yourself and you have strong opinions, that will come across really well and you'll get much better marks in the exam. So yeah, I'm going to just break it down into maybe something like 4 middle paragraphs for this one. They don't all have to be the same length in a speech. So in an essay, your middle paragraph should all be equal. But in the creative non-fiction writing, so speech, letter, article, etc., they don't have to be equal. It's actually better if they're not. So yeah, you can get away with like 4 or 5 middle paragraphs if you want. and then your conclusion. So yeah, I'm just sort of thinking, how can I turn this into those points? How can I logically sequence it? Probably I would start with a counter argument, I think, personally. It's always good to have at least one counter argument paragraph in any kind of persuasive writing. That's where you explore the opposite side. So, yeah, counter argument, let me think. Yeah, so what I would do is, if I was going to expand this into a paragraph, it may seem cruel to keep animals in captivity. Then I would give evidence and I would analyze that fairly before I present the counter argument. When we actually look at the behavior of animals, do they seem miserable in zoos? Do they seem miserable in domestic environments? I personally would argue not, mainly because I love Chester Zoo and I go a lot, and I spent a long time watching the animals there, and they're playing, they're eating, they're cuddling each other and sleeping together. They're not distressed or worried. They don't feel like they're having a bad time. And yeah, and so I'd use my personal anecdotes, my own opinions as well there. So yeah, I'd start with that counter argument. Then I'd maybe go more into different topics. So I'd talk about pets and keeping animals. Then I would talk about zoos and conservation. Then I would talk about eating meat, because for me, I think the first two are very obviously good. They're fine. I don't see any problem with those personally. The last one, the eating meat, I think is a bit more of a debate in my head. So I might have more of a balanced argument on that one, because I was vegetarian for 7 years, and I did used to think that eating all meat was bad, and then over time came around to the idea that if I buy meat in an ethical way and I think about where it comes from and the quality of life of the animals, that it's okay. So for me, that one's a little bit more of a complex issue. It's not so straightforward. Some people might say that with zoos, but yeah, from my personal background, I worked in dog rescue with wild dogs that I trained to be domestic. And so I'm quite used to kind of dealing with wild animals and how they behave and how they react to things. And when I go to zoos and I look at how animals behave in zoos, they're definitely not distressed. And so, yeah, my opinion is that zoos actually do a lot of good and they're really great. But like I say, my sister hates them. A lot of people hate them. So it depends on your personal take on each question. What do you feel? Do you agree or disagree? Do you feel like is your gut feeling positive or negative towards it, and why? And no opinion is right or wrong, really, when it comes to these. It's just about being able to justify and back up what you're saying and what you think. So the reasoning and the justification is a lot more important than the opinion. The opinion can be anything. It can be really offensive and controversial. It can be very normal and average for what people think in the modern world. It doesn't really matter. They're not going to mark you based on having the right or wrong opinion. They're going to mark you based on your reasoning, like how much depth and detail can you go into with those opinions. So yeah, hopefully your plans are starting to look kind of similar to mine. Yeah, hopefully that was useful for you. So we're not going to go into the writing of it in this class just because we're kind of running out of time a little bit. We're just at the end of everything. But yeah, if you wanted to, as an extension from this class, or if you have a break and come back to it later today, feel free to sort of write this up into your own answer as well. See how it goes. Try and use interesting structuring, strong personality, rhetorical techniques, clear logical arguments, and everything else that we've covered in the class. So yeah, I think that went really well. And yeah, thank you for for kind of keeping up with me. I did give you a very fast sort of breakdown of everything. So yeah, thank you for following along. And hopefully it's been useful for you. If you've got any last minute questions or you need any anything specifically answering about speech writing or about English GCSE, feel free to just pop them in the chat box. I'm just going to hang around for like another few minutes just to answer any questions. So yeah, any questions you've got at all, feel free to put them in there. And yeah, I'll just kind of plug Scrbbly a little bit more while I'm waiting for anyone to type questions. So Scrbbly, which is the platform that I and my team have created, we're an online English platform. We make educational resources for students, and we also offer things like tuition or full video courses if you need like an entire step-by-step support with the GCSE. So yeah, check us out at scrbbly.com. If you look at the comments for this video, there's a free download of the speech document that I used in class, but there's also like a full AQA GCSE English Language course if you want. There's also descriptive writing, advanced descriptive writing and narrative writing, I think, on there. And at the moment, the descriptive writing course is free, so feel free to sign up to that if you think it's going to be helpful. But yeah, check us out, and yeah, hopefully you find some things on there that will help you further. So yeah, I think that's about it for today. Thank you so much for coming to the masterclass and working alongside me. Hopefully you're feeling a lot more confident about speeches, and yeah, subscribe as well if you want to come to any of these live classes. We do them once a month at the moment, and then I'm trying to get back into posting regular videos on top of that as well. So by January, we should be posting some regular videos weekly too. So yeah, really lovely to meet you guys, and thank you very much. And I'll see you soon in a future Scrbbly thing. Bye for now.